Okay, so we're now on the Bugatti Owners Club, and I'm talking to John Staveley. You've got a fabulous display here. It's 100 years of the Type 35 this year, and I noticed they're all Type 35s, except one's the 37, isn't it?
Yes.
And the 37 is the same car, but with a smaller engine.
Four-cylinder engines.
Four-cylinder 1500.
Yes, so it's a 1500 four-cylinder.
And that was for the Voiturette class, was it? Or not?
Well, they ran in Grand Prix, and there was
well.
a period when the Grand Prix formula was 1.5 litres.
Right.
And so the 37 ran in that. But the 35 is basically where it all started. And of course they turned up in August in 1924 at Lyon.
Yeah.
Completely surprised with a team of 6 cars, all looked identical. There's a picture over there somewhere of the 6 cars, and
so interesting. Yeah, go on.
And it was a completely new car.
Yeah.
So until 1924,
the one from the year before, was it a Type 23 tank?
No, it was a Type 30 with that cigar-shaped body.
Ah, okay.
Which they had developed to make a racing car, but it was based on a touring production car.
But this is a pure racing car.
It's a pure racing car.
From the ground upwards.
And it's all new. So it has the 8-cylinder engine with roller bearing crank, which was a very important feature in the Type 35, and led to its huge success. And so it also, in its original form at Lyon, they all had those alloy wheels.
Yeah. Which are a very immediate distinctive feature of the Type 35. But like this has got wire wheels. You can have wire wheels, but that's one that immediately sort of marks it out.
Yes, the alloy wheels mark it out, and the alloy wheels were a very important part of the success of the car.
Right.
And it's always puzzled me that they were such a huge advantage to Bugatti that no one copied them.
No.
There were no more alloy-wheeled racing cars until after the Second World War.
Really?
So Bugatti introduced them in 1924.
And that was the first time an alloy wheel was on a racing car?
Yep, absolutely. And it made a huge difference.
Yeah.
For various reasons. And it's not because they're lighter.
Right.
Because they're not very much lighter than these
wire wheels.
Wire wheels.
Right.
But they have a huge advantage that the brake drum is actually part of the wheel,
right?
And it's cast in the alloy. It's a cast iron drum in the aluminium casting, and when you use drum brakes, they get very hot. Now, bear in mind that first Grand Prix and most Grand Prix of that period was 7 hours long.
Yeah.
So they were racing for 7 hours, and those wheels allowed them to cool the brakes, but also to attend to the brakes. The drum comes off when you change a wheel. So you're going to change wheels because you're going to wear out tyres. And of course, sadly, at that first race, the whole thing turned into a bit of a nightmare for Bugatti because the tyres were poorly vulcanized.
Right.
By
so
the
I knew that was the problem. They didn't have a very gracious start because of the tires. Because of the tires.
Yes, because the next race in the series was at San Sebastian.
Right.
And the Bugatti, the 35, finished second behind the winning Sunbeam.
Right.
So, and also set the fastest lap.
Henry Seagrave in the Sunbeam, wasn't it? And he won 2 Grand Prix. That was the second one, wasn't it?
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
And his teammate NEC Guinness had a bad accident.
Yep.
And his co-driver was killed, wasn't he?
Absolutely. But we don't talk about it.
We don't. We're here to talk about Bugatti. Now, we can talk all day about the technicalities, and we talked about the alloys, we talked about the engine. But I mean, one of the things that everybody says about the Bugatti Type 35 is it's just such a perfect looking car. It's immaculate, and it's to me it's so purposeful. It's designed for purpose so much so, and you alluded to that from the start.
Yeah, every detail you look at is kind of artistically designed, Bugatti, people say he was an artist. Well, he came from an artistic family.
Yes.
But he was an engineer, and he was a very clever engineer as well. And he recognised, for instance, you look at the front drum irons where the springs go to, they look incredibly flimsy and weak.
Yeah.
But they're as strong as they need to be. And if you looked at the chassis, in the middle, it's deep and strong where it needs to be.
Yeah.
It has the strength it needs. So the whole thing was purpose built for that race and therefore for the team. And of course, in 5 years, the 35 won something over 2,000 fairly major races. And one of the reasons was the reliability of it. The other reason, of course, was anybody, Joe Public, could go to Molsheim and buy one.
Yeah, I mean, they made about 400 or 500, am I right?
They made certainly 350 odd Type 35s were built.
And then there was Type 37s and Type 39s were.
But their competitors, like Alfa Romeo, they didn't sell racing cars to the public. They made the P1, the P2, etc. They built those because they wanted to have success racing to sell the road cars. But Bugatti was a bit sharper than that. He sold the race cars
and he
as
was
well.
very much a rule unto itself.
And there are races, you find pictures of races where there's nothing but Type 35s on the grid. You can have a long grid of racing cars, all Type 35s.
And they were very successful in the Targa Florio, didn't they?
They won
6, 5, 6.
Yep. They were very successful in the Targa
It was the car for the one. But it's just a wonderful.
A Type 35T.
Yeah.
The T stands for Targa, and they enlarged the engine to 2.3 litres.
Right.
Before they supercharged it, because originally these were all
2 litres.
2 litre unsupercharged, and Bugatti didn't believe in supercharging. He kind of seemed to take
like Mr. Bentley as well. He was the same, didn't he? He wasn't keen on supercharging.
He wasn't at all keen. I actually, showing my age here, but I actually talked to W.O. Bentley.
Did you really? Well,
yeah, and I found him a very interesting man.
I'm sure. So, just obviously, we talked about the 35. Can we talk about the 37? So we'll just talk about the 37, just because it's interesting to talk about the different versions. This one.
No, the black one, or dark blue, is a 37.
That's the 37. So this one's a Type 37, which is the 1500cc four-cylinder.
Four-cylinder. Yes.
Is there? I mean, it seems to have a noticeably smaller radiator. Is that a distinguishing feature, or is that just happens to be? Because I think there are various. As we said, there's several hundred of these built. And
it's deceptive. I think it looks smaller, but it's not actually any different.
It's because the chrome's sort of cowled in a bit.
The point about these early cars, the radiators are tapered, to fit the body.
Yeah.
But the later cars, the 35B, etc., the supercharged cars were producing more heat, and they needed a bigger radiator.
Right.
So they made them wider, and they made the sides parallel-sided, or much more nearly parallel-sided. Right. And aesthetically, that looks perfect. To me, that's absolutely.
This is a lovely little car.
Well, it's actually physically no smaller than a 35. The chassis are totally interchangeable.
Yeah.
So
how are they to drive comparatively? I mean,
well, obviously an unblown 35 is faster than an unblown 37.
Right.
But this particular 37 is a supercharged car.
Right.
And has always been supercharged from new. And a supercharged 37, a 37A therefore, is probably equivalent in performance to an unblown 35.
Right. And this was for the class of racing below Grand Prix racing, is it?
No, they actually raced in Grand Prix. There was a period when the Grand Prix
said yes, there was only 1.5
1.5 litres. So Bugatti also made an 8-cylinder 1.5 litre.
Yeah, Type 39.
Yeah, 39 was 1.5 litre. There were,
So that was sort of like a downscale 35 engine, presumably.
yeah, pretty similar. The important difference between another important difference between a 35, a Grand Prix 35 like that, and a 37 is that the engine is much simpler. This has
This one, yeah.
It has a plain bearing engine with white melt bearings. The 35 has a roller bearing engine.
Sure.
And the roller bearing engine gave them a huge benefit in terms of reliability. And if you think of that running 7 hours in a Grand Prix,
Yeah.
it could run 7 hours and you didn't worry that the oil was being used up. They had no measure of actual oil level in the car. So if you saw the oil pressure gauge dip when you went around a corner, you got your driving mechanic, your riding mechanic, or the driver, after the riding mechanic was banned, the driver pumped oil from a tank under the passenger seat into the sub. But a roller bearing engine is quite happy to run for a short period of time without any oil. Whereas a plain bearing engine will be destroyed by running with no oil. So it was a different kettle of fish.
And just as we're here as Brooklands TV,
Right?
representing Brooklands Museum, did any of the cars on the stand race at Brooklands? Do you know? Have any of them?
I
got a
don't
Brooklands
know if
history?
they had a particular.
I mean, obviously there were Bugatti Type 35s that raced it,
That- and-
plenty of them. I mean, Malcolm Campbell raced one, I think, didn't he?
Malcolm Campbell raced. Yes, he was a Bugatti dealer as well as
He sold them from his site on
he sold them from his premises, and he raced a number of times. He raced 35s.
Yeah.
Brooklyn.
I think I saw in September. I was at the concourse at Hampton Court,
Right,
and
yeah.
there was a Type 37 which he'd sold.
Right,
there. So
yeah.
obviously it was sold from Brooklands. Yeah, that's interesting. Anything else you could tell us about the particular cars on the stand? Is there any of them have a specific interesting history of these on
Well,
you've got here?
there was another interesting car that's different slightly.
Go on,
This, which is a Type 35A.
right, so it's large.
No, the Type 35A.
Quite a large range.
What happened is Bugatti needed a way to sell cars to people who were less well-heeled than those who bought the
Grand Prix car.
the full Grand Prix car. So this uses an engine
Right,
that was based on a touring car engine.
right.
It only has 3 main bearings and it only has plain bearings.
Right.
And so it's a much cheaper engine. The
To build and more reliable to run, or it doesn't need as much.
No, it's definitely
maintenance?
not more reliable.
Oh, right. Does it need more maintenance or less maintenance, or
No, it's probably no different. Back
Right.
then, you would have, if you were doing a big race, you would have rebuilt after every race anyway.
Right.
So work went back to the factory and were rebuilt. But this doesn't have the roller bearing crank, has a plain bearing engine, and consequently, you can't afford to let the oil level drop low. You cannot afford to over rev it.
right?
They will not. 4,000 revs is the limit for these, whereas a 35 is certainly safe to 5,500 revs, probably at 6,000 revs, and consequently this went to people who couldn't afford a full Grand Prix car.
Terrible.
It had smaller brakes,
Right.
it had wire wheels, and it was a lot
And
cheaper.
is it meant as a touring car, or did people
No,
race
no,
these?
it's a racing car.
But for people, sort of like a club racer, I suppose.
Yeah, for people who couldn't afford the full Grand Prix car.
Yeah.
But bear in mind how many we said they sold of the Grand Prix cars. It's quite a thing that he came up with the idea of doing a cheaper version
Sure.
to
For the
help
amateur
sales.
driver, yeah.
For the a lot of them were amateur drivers. Of course, they were rich
course, yeah.
amateurs then, just as they are today.
Yeah.
And the fact that you could sell 350 odd Grand Prix cars, quite amazing, really.
Yeah, very much so.
And of course, originally, mostly in France. The main customers were France, so quite a lot came from England. But, I mean, lots of Bugattis in America now.
Yeah.
But
they've
back
gone there in
then,
recent times.
there were virtually no Bugattis in America. You know, they weren't, it wasn't their market. They weren't selling cars there.
So here we are, just to finish on Bugatti, the Bugatti Trust Archive. So you may have seen on the Bugatti stand, Bugatti at the members club or owners club, to be correct, own Prescott Hill Climb, and they have a museum there with a lot of the archive material. And this is sort of just illustrating that. What I was interested in picking out was some of the characters that we see here. So that's Ettore Bugatti, who founded the car company, Le Patron as he was known. And I think that young man behind him is this young man here, who's his son Jean. Now, if you follow the history of Bugatti, really in the 30s, Ettore stood back a long way from the company, and Jean really ran the company. Did a lot. In the 30s, they concentrated on one sole model, the Type 37, and he did a lot of the design work and stuff like that. Sadly, he was killed a month before the start of the Second World War. The car they had, a Type 57, I think it was known as the Tank, which had won Le Mans earlier that year, 1939, was being prepared for another race, and he, late at night, sort of 10 o'clock at night, 9, 10 o'clock at night, went out on the main road to test it, and which was near Molsheim, where Bugattis are made, and they did that on a fairly regular basis, and they had factory members came and sort of stopped all the side roads. But actually, when he tried on that fateful day, supposedly drunken cyclist, pulled out in front of him. He lost control of the car, hit a tree, and was killed. And that really is, in many ways, a sad fact, because had he lived and gone through the Second World War, perhaps Bugatti might, after the war, have carried on. Ettore himself, I think it was 1947, he himself died, and the car side of it sort of gradually wound down and disappeared in the mid-50s. But I think it lost its sort of heart when Jean was killed. Moving down, I guess that's one of the Bugatti daughters. I don't know who that is. But this chap is interesting. Now, that's Rembrandt Bugatti. He was the younger brother of Ettore. He was an artist. He was a sculptor, and particularly sculpted animals. Pre-sort of First World War, he did a lot of animals at Antwerp Zoo. Bit of a sad character, tragic. He went into a bout of depression during the First World War, and eventually he gassed himself in his Paris flat. But his sculptures of animals, which are rather wonderful, are very valuable these days. I think they achieve sort of £1 million type prices. And there is a gallery in London on Jermyn Street, just behind Fortnum and Mason's, called the Sladmore Gallery, and they specialise in that type of sculptures, in particular his, and they publish books on him. I've got a couple of those. And then finally, this chap here. Now that is Carlo Bugatti. So he's Rembrandt and Ettore's father, and Bugatti. We think of it as a French car, but the Bugatti family were actually Italian, and he was based in Milan, and he made Art Deco furniture, which again is quite collectible. The first time I remember seeing any of it was, I think 1987, around then, Elton John had a clear out, and he had it's Carlo Bugatti. He had some Carlo Bugatti furniture that was sold as part of that. But he was sort of the start of it. And I know that he was quite a celebrity in Milan, and various sort of the arty type world people actually did come and visit the Bugattis in Milan. So that's the start of it. Although I think if you really follow it back, there were earlier Bugattis that were in the art world as well. But yes, that's the father. That's the man who founded the company. That's the son.